So in Russia, in Moscow, there was a horrific terror attack where at least, and this is the number now, the number might continue to increase as time goes on, as there are many people still injured, and they're still going through the rubble, I believe, at the concert hall itself. There was a concert hall attack in Moscow, killing at least 137 people, with many more injured. Number may continue to rise. Now, when this attack happened, you saw a lot of people online try to jump out and point fingers, say it's this, say it's that, say, I know the Ukrainian military intelligence came out and said it was a false flag. The Russians came out and immediately started trying to connect it to the Ukrainians. And then, to the surprise of, I would say probably most people who were just finding out about ISIS-K, maybe like a David Sachs type, ISIS-K claimed responsibility. Now, that's not to say that everyone expected it to be ISIS-K, that they're experts, just that no one would have probably, who have been following Russia's fight with ISIS, or America's fight with, or that fight with ISIS and ISIS-K, period, would doubt the idea that ISIS-K would do something like this, especially when you see the style of the attack. I mean, if you watch those guys out there, they are not super trained soldiers. You could see them, and I've commented this on many shows, it looked like they were trying to throw the bullets at them, because every time they shot, they jerked forward, and you don't see people do that unless they don't know how to fire a gun, really. The guns were sparking like crazy, as if they were possibly handcrafted at some underground workshop. Of course, that's speculation, but the guns were sparking. For what reason? I don't think we know yet. It was done in the style that ISIS is known for. This type of attack targeting soft civilian targets. And there was a warning about a possible terrorist attack in advance from the United States. If this was, say, a CIA operation, it wouldn't make sense for the United States to try to warn the Russians publicly in advance that there could possibly be terror attacks at, and they even said this in the original statement before this happened, concert halls. Concert halls was specifically listed. So ISIS comes forward. They not only claim it, they release GoPro footage of it. They released a video of what looks like the fighters, but we don't know for sure. It could be somebody else in masks after all, recording some video message. And so if you are anybody who knows about ISIS-K's, attacks in Afghanistan or Algeria or Australia or Austria or Bangladesh or Belgium or Benin or Burkina Faso or Cameroon or Canada or the Caucasus, which by the way is within Russia, Chechnya, Dagestan, Chad, China, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Denmark, Egypt, France, Germany, India, Indonesia, Iran, Iraq, Israel, Jordan, Kenya, Kyrgyzstan, Lebanon, Libya, Mali, Mozambique, Niger. And there's more. By the way, I'm going to give credit to Aaron Zelen here, who went to the Amaq news agency, which is ISIS's news agency, and went through all of the different countries, and there's more that we didn't list, that ISIS has had activity in, tried to do attacks in, and have claimed attacks in, right? So these are people who have, done attacks in a lot of countries. And when you understand Russia's relationship with Assad, which is not friendly with ISIS, or if you look at Russia's relationship with many military dictators in West Africa, or if you look at military dictatorships who have fought ISIS in the region that Russia has assisted, that would be another motivation. That's not even mention ISIS's, their attempted presence within Russia itself, within Muslim areas of Russia. There is motivation for the ISIS to do this. It looks like an ISIS attack. The guys don't look well trained. ISIS claimed it. ISIS released video footage of it. And ISIS is known for these style of attacks, and they've done many others like this. By the way, I do want to throw out that U.S. government has also come forward and said that their intelligence points towards it of being an ISIS operation. The only two groups that disagree about this, when it comes to groups of some note to pay attention to, is the Russians, who say that it was, the Ukrainians were somehow involved, and they keep changing the story. Or first it was maybe directly, then it's, well, maybe indirectly because they don't have any direct evidence, or the Ukrainian military intelligence said that it was a possible Russian insider operation, some false flag, if you will, but they haven't provided any evidence of that either. So as of right now, that's a claim from Ukrainian military intelligence. So the evidence is overwhelming, I think, right now, pointing towards this being an ISIS operation. I'm not saying I know 100% it's an ISIS operation, but it matches a pattern of behavior. It looks like an ISIS operation. ISIS is claiming that they have footage of it. You know, you get to a point where if it walks like a dog and it wags a tail like a dog and it barks like a dog, it's probably a dog. That's my consensus at this point, is it's probably a dog, especially if I'm looking at other people and they're pointing at it saying dog, and the dog's saying, yeah, I'm a dog. Woof, woof, I'm a dog. But not everybody is going along with this narrative. While the false flag narrative is mostly being pivoted on Twitter and by Ukrainian military intelligence, the narrative, which I already talked about this on the panel I was just on, but I don't think it was a false flag. And the reason I don't think it's a false flag is I don't think the Russians make false flags ambiguous. They tend to be pretty direct about it, whether it be their false flag at the start of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, having Russian soldiers trust Ukrainian soldiers across the border, whether it be their disaster with the FSB SIM card sting, which you can Google yourself. They're usually not so ambiguous about it. And with how ambiguous it is, and with them unable to tie like direct evidence into this, I think it's much more likely, even if they are using it as an attempt to mobilize, that this is a disaster that's happened to Russia, possibly because they focused their security apparatus elsewhere, maybe with the invasion. Who knows all of the facts yet? Not us, that's for sure. And then after this disaster's happened, they're going to take it and use it as a weapon against Ukraine, which has happened before in world history. So I think that's more likely. But you know, some people disagree with me. You know, I think we'll end with you know, I think maybe do you guys want to start with Putin or end with Putin? I think we can start with Putin, right? I mean, Putin makes sense to start with. Putin has accused Ukraine of, and we could show you the full speech, but I don't know if we should go through the full speech. But Putin has come out and accused Ukraine in one way, because there was this van that people tried to do it and it kind of fell through because it was Belarusian, not Ukrainian. The way that the Russians are trying to connect this to the Ukrainians is saying, well, maybe Ukraine wasn't directly involved. Maybe these are not Ukrainians. Maybe Ukraine didn't train them. Maybe Ukraine didn't do this, didn't do that. But Ukraine prepared an escape route for these terrorists after they attacked this hall, and then those terrorists were running towards Ukraine to cross the border. Here it is.
Время можно сказать следующее. Все четверо непосредственных исполнителей теракта, все те, кто стрелял, убивал людей, найдены и задержаны. Они пытались скрыться и двигались в сторону Украины, где по предварительным данным для них с украинской стороны было подготовлено окно для перехода государственной границы.
So it seemed that what he is saying is that Ukraine, for whatever reason, while the United States was warning Russia about the attack in advance, by the way, Western media, Russian state media is really trying to tie the U.S. into it in some way, saying this is CIA, people online as well. I would say it's weird to warn the Russians about it and then do it. If you're trying to do a terror attack, you usually would not warn them in advance. But with no evidence, the accusation is, even he hasn't presented anything yet, that they were trying to cross the border. Now, there's a few things that confuse me. Number one, what would be Ukraine's motivation to do this, especially on the eve of what many people thought was going to be Russia's time to mobilize and try to get another 300,000 soldiers to send over to Ukraine to try to push the offensive while the Ukrainians have the ammo shortage? It doesn't make any sense to me. It doesn't match any pattern of behavior that we've seen from the Ukrainians before. It does match a pattern of behavior we've seen from Russia before. It doesn't match, I mean, not Russia. Well, Russia in some ways when it comes to like mass graves, but from ISIS before, but not Ukraine. And so this connection, put those two facts aside, mostly kind of smells weird to me, because in order for these guys to flee into Ukraine, the closer they get to the front, the more checkpoints they're going to see. That's just how it works. The closer you get to the front line, the more checkpoints there are. And so if they're moving towards the Ukrainian border, they're going to go through checkpoint after checkpoint after checkpoint. And then as they get to the front line, there's going to be the Russian front line. And so the Russians are going to have to move out of the way to allow these guys to get to the Ukrainian lines, which then they will then move out of the way. Now, I'm not saying it's impossible that somebody cooked up this scheme, especially if their plan was to abandon the terrorists all along. All I'm saying is it doesn't make much sense as something that would be successfully conducted out. Maybe you can try to say that, well, it was never meant to succeed. It was just meant to get these guys to do the attack and then abandon them to cause discontent within Russian society. But until there's some evidence provided, this is just a claim without substantiated evidence that doesn't really make any sense to begin with. It seems like a desperate attempt by the Russians to try to tie this terror attack, which could be, in other circumstances, pointed to as a massive security failure from the Russian government, as they failed to save like over 140 people. It took a while for the police to get there. All of the shooters were able to get away, and so they had to go on a giant manhunt after these shooters. And I mean, who knows? Maybe those shooters could have got away and then done another mass shooting, killed another 100 people, killed 150 people, maybe even more people. Who knows? And instead of the security candidate Vladimir Putin having to defending his country and security, like, wait, I thought we did this whole war to protect Russia from terrorism, and now we have this gigantic terror attack from not the Ukrainians but from these guys, from these guys. Why weren't we focusing on this? Why are we focusing on invading other countries when we could be focusing on defending our own country? But to avoid that whole conversation, as Putin is the stability candidate, he's supposed to be the security candidate. To avoid the whole conversation, just make it part of the war. And hey, not only does it avoid this extremely embarrassing political scandal in a way that Bibi Netanyahu has not been able to, because he doesn't have the same control of the press that Vladimir Putin does, as he's built the system around himself. But it also helps beat the drum more for the war. And I've seen more people coming out rallying for the war around this. I think it was Shaman, that Russian pop singer that the Russian government's been propping up. He released a song called Mobilize and trying to rally the people. I've seen Russian politicians come out like Dmitry Medvedev and others, Russian propagandists come out, beat a similar beat of, we gotta go, we gotta fight this war in order to, avenge so-and-so. And you've even seen like individuals come out with, for example, here is a signed shell that was fired at Ukrainian positions. That's for Crocus. It's for the theater, for the performance location, for the the concert that was attacked. Even though, again, Ukraine, as of right now, there's been no evidence provided that Ukraine had any involvement. Now, I don't like doing comparisons, but I said this earlier. It's like trying to use 9/11 to invade Iraq. These are two totally, obviously the geopolitics behind the wars, all the history is different. But when it comes to using something that's completely unrelated as a justification to try to invade a country who's not at fault for said terroristic act, yeah, it's like trying to use 9/11 to invade Iraq. This is trying to use a country that had nothing to do with this terror attack to further invade Ukraine, which could lead, horrifically, ironically enough, a kind of horrific humor here, to more resources, more security resources being dedicated to this invasion, which is taking away security resources that could rather be used to stabilize areas where this type of terrorism could be likely, or to try to deal with these types of terroristic threats in the future. I'm not saying they're going to do nothing. I'm sure that the Putin government understands that they cannot just say, it was Ukraine every time something like this happens. There's been a huge spike in anti-Tajik racist incidents in Russia, whether it be, cab drivers being told to screw off, or, attacks on Tajiks because the fighters are reportedly, we still don't know everything for sure. We certainly haven't gotten a fair trial when we're seeing the suspects getting their ears cut off and fed to them. We're seeing others beaten half to death. But as of right now, the narrative is, or that as far as what's being spread, is that the Tajik, and so there's been a spike in incidents towards Tajiks, and so this could genuinely cause divisions within the people that make up Russian society, because there are a lot of people from that country. And there are real problems here that have to be addressed, and I think the Putin government is going to do some of the stuff to address this problem. But as long as they're engaging in an offensive war elsewhere, it's going to be harder to dedicate the resources needed to stabilize the country at home, because you're investing ever-increasing amounts of money into national defense as more and more oil production is getting targeted, with 10% of Russian oil production being taken out, according to the Kiev Independent. and more sanctions being placed on Russia as the economic sanctions continue to tighten. Maybe not as fast as people would want in Ukraine, but they do. And so this is to me, this is the most cynical use of these people's corpses. It's really disgusting to use these corpses to go make more corpses in Ukraine, even though the reason these corpses are here in the first place has nothing to do with the Russian invasion of Ukraine and everything to do with the fight against this type of religious extremism. It's honestly really sad to know that all these dead bodies are going to be used to go terrorize other people. But that's my perspective. Some people disagree with me. And an old friend of the show, the Yankee Tanky, responded to me saying, like, well, basically saying what I've said, but more condensed. With this TikTok video that he released, he's now using, I think, his real name, Joey Shantz, and he wanted to respond and own me with facts and logic. So let's see.
So they're trying.
By the way, I haven't watched this in advance. I'm watching this completely live. Haven't seen this in advance, so I kind of did it as a treat to myself. So let's go check it out.
So they're trying to tell us that, well, ISIS did the terrorist attack in Moscow, and frankly, we don't need to care about it anymore. Let's assume that actually is true.
Who said that? Look, I don't know who. Look. People are saying, because that's what the majority of the evidence points towards, that ISIS did the attack. But I don't remember there being a second byline of who cares now. If either our officials or etc. didn't care, then why did they warn publicly before it happened that there was a threat of terror attacks on locations, including concert halls?
And it is ISIS. You don't actually think that the U.S. government might actually consider funding a terrorist organization like ISIS? Well, I got bad news for you, bud. They've done it before. Here's Obama literally admitting that they have.
So with the additional steps I ordered last month, we're speeding up training of ISIL forces, including volunteers from Sunni tribes in Anbar province. We're speeding up training of ISIL forces, including volunteers from Sunni tribes in Anbar province.
I'm sorry, but Obama did not say in that clip, we're speeding up training of ISIS. We're going to train ISIS. Obama did Operation Inherent Resolve, which was one of the most deadly blows to ISIS that you can conceive of in the region. Doesn't make sense for him to build them up just to knock them down. And that statement doesn't make... Why would he... By the way, if this was a secret operation to fund ISIS, it'd be one thing. He was like, here's a bunch of leaked documents. And it'd be like, oh, I guess I have to go look into it. But you really expect me to believe that Obama just went out in public and said, we're going to train ISIS, and then nobody said anything, and it was the Yankee Tanky Joey Sanchez that was able to dig it up and expose Obama? No. I mean, you're insulting everyone's intelligence. But I mean, Yankee Tanky.
So this idea as if the United States or the West could never be involved with a terrorist attack in Moscow is absolutely asinine. And let's not forget the most important part here. If you live in the West, your taxpayer dollars in one form or another is being used as a mechanism to be able to fund terrorist attacks in Russia. It's
crazy that he did none of the foundations and he did nothing to prove that, like, here is our money, here's our weapons being used to strike like a kindergarten, and this kindergarten had all these children and it killed them, and they were doing this deliberately to make the Russians give you... It's like, no, he didn't do it, he just said it, and then he just moved on. But by the way, notice that none of this is based in fact. The only attempt at a fact here is a clip chimp of former President Obama. All of this exists in speculation and purely speculation. Why does this have to exist purely in speculation? It's because they don't have any evidence to back it up. And since they don't have any evidence to back it up, but they want to believe it, they have to conjure something up to fill the little puzzle piece in their preconceptions of how this war is supposed to work or how the United States is engaging in this war.
Pro-Palestinian should be taking the hint and realize that Ukraine is actually the bad guy.
Wow.
Notice Ukraine's the one that aligns itself with Israel, not Russia. Russia is moving farther and farther away from Israel.
I want to put out there that Stalin helped recognize Israel. Stalin actually helped flip Soviet Union's opinion to recognize Israel, to make the Soviet Union the first country to recognize Israel as a state. Just saying that because this guy's Yankee Tanky and he loves Stalin. Okay? Okay? And so Stalin, I mean, by those standards, Stalin's a Zionist. I'm just throwing that out there. Secondly, Ukraine recognizes that Palestine should exist. They haven't aligned themselves with Hamas, but they believe that Palestine should exist. And they're a country that's at war trying to get weapons from Israel, which Israel has not given them. They've given them early warning radar. But, I mean, when people say, like, moving towards Israel, like, they have a relationship with Israel. They're not giving Israel weapons or anything. But, yeah, they certainly want support from Israel.
And it's for a fucking reason.
Geopolitics. I thought this guy was a realist.
So that means the pro-Palestinian crowd needs to recognize, one, not just you need to support the axis of resistance around Iran, but you probably should also be supporting countries like Russia.
I don't know how much of a knuckle-dragging loser you have to be like, no, occupied people. You don't understand. You won't truly, really be fighting for your freedom unless you support the occupation of another people. Like, come on. Come on. This is a weak sauce from Yankee Tanky. By the way, I want to throw out a few things here. The main thing I wanted to throw out here is, number one, Mario Newfall. He came out with a tweet saying that, and he's one of Elon's boys, one of the guy Elon get a lot of information from. He was saying that one of the terror attackers was a Ukrainian or a Ukrainian soldier. His source was Twitter. Surprisingly enough, Twitter was not the most reliable source. It was BS. He had to come out and apologize later. David Sachs, somebody who's been recently on Twitter saying, it's likely that the Ukrainians did this. It's very unlikely that ISIS-K did this, was saying this about ISIS-K, another one of Elon's boys, just a few years ago. About after ISIS-K did the terror attack during the Afghanistan withdrawal. It killed all those people, all those locals and our soldiers. And we know now, it was ISIS-K. But look what David Sachs said at the time about this. And when we talk about the caliber of people we're dealing with here. This is from Wesley Morgan first, says, the I never heard of ISIS-K before last month people blow my mind. You can be critical of botched U.S. counterterrorism without bragging about your ignorance and inattention. And David Sachs responded, your article does not contain a single reference to ISIS-K. The Pentagon concocted a cover story for killing innocent civilians using a scary new code word. But somehow we're the ignorant ones. Only the Washington blob could fall for this because it makes them feel like experts. David Sachs doesn't even believe ISIS-K is real. And this is the type of guy that's going to tell you from their expert position, oh, well, I don't think that it was really ISIS-K. You don't know anything about ISIS-K. You don't know anything about their ideology. You don't know anything about where they came from. Like, where ISIS-K, what does K stand for? Does it stand for a province in an area that they want to build? Does he know any, does he know any of this information? No, he just doesn't know. It doesn't match his little puzzle piece. You know what this feels like to me? Let's say we were making a puzzle piece. You guys were watching, I don't know, baby Dylan, young 6-7-year-old Dylan as he made a puzzle, right? And I'm doing the puzzle and I put it all together and then I put all the pieces down and then there's some spots that aren't there and I have some pieces to the side and you're like, well, those pieces didn't fit in the puzzle. What do you do with those pieces? And I'm just saying, no, those pieces don't exist. That's what's happening here. It's just ignoring the pieces that are inconvenient to the picture that he wants to paint as it was during that withdrawal. And now he's just saying it wasn't them because probably not. And that's the peak of his intellectual vigor. And these are the people that Elon are promoting on this platform as news sources and journalists. Very aggravating. A lot of this stuff starts on this social media platform. A lot of this nonsense starts on the social media platform. It's extremely frustrating. But I want you guys to know that this is not a new phenomenon. Terror groups having their I don't want to say thunder, but their attacks stolen from them. The Onion actually did some fantastic reporting back in the day covering this very phenomenon after 9/11. Check this out.
A new book called The Truth About September 11th claims to present evidence that the destruction of the World Trade Center was not the work of terrorists, but was in fact perpetrated by the U.S. government. With us, the much maligned book's author, William Gerard.
Most of the mainstream media, they're just too afraid to even have me on, so thank you.
Also joining us is Omar al-Farouk of al-Qaeda. He's an outspoken critic of what he calls Gerard's 9/11 conspiracy theories.
Yes, Michael, I assure you that is all this book is complete nonsense.
Mr. Gerard, how did you arrive at the conclusions in your book? Where are the facts
Well, through
here?
scientific examination of ground zero. For example, the melted core. I mean, that was
here we
definitely
go.
evidence that there were thermite bombs that were used to bring down those buildings.
I can assure you we did not use thermite bombs. I did the research myself. It would not have worked. We flew an enormous airplane into a building. Okay, I think it is obvious what caused the building to crumble.
Why
It
are you
is-
being so close-minded to this, sir? If more
How
people
would you
just had
like
the
it
courage.
if you spent, 2 months in a mountain cave, sleeping on rocks, planning something really special, only to have someone take the credit away from you? Say,
More
oh
people
no,
just
you
have
don't
the
deserve the
courage
credit
to
for
open
it.
up their
It-
minds
it's-
and
Mr.
learn
Gerard,
the
Mr.
truth.
Gerard, why in the world would the U.S. government want to stage this attack on their own soil?
Greed, of course, and to increase the oil revenues, the weapons industry, and security industry, and these are all things that Bush and
Bush's administration, they're a den of jackals. We certainly have common ground there. But what does not follow is why would they
doesn't
kill?
follow.
Why would they kill 3,000 of their own infidels?
Well, of course, because
Why-
think about it. It was all
would they-
part of their plan to build a case for the war in Iraq.
That's right. That's my favorite line in the whole skit. Why would they kill 3,000 of their own infidels?
To plan all of this. Why is his approval rating, in El Haman, and why is Osama bin Laden safe in somewhere?
Yes, the Iraq War has done serious damage to the Bush administration.
Here, look. I have names, phone numbers, everyone involved in this.
Got to be kidding.
Okay?
Names and phone numbers.
I have here the voucher for the lessons, for the flight lessons.
This is
for
obviously
our
forged
brave
documents. I mean,
pilots.
come on, did President Bush give you these himself?
I
this
work
is
for Bush.
ridiculous. Most
Me and
definitely
Bush,
makes
we
sense.
go out, we hang. He
Why
goes,
do we call
hey,
Cheney
bring
the
on the
puppet master,
forgery.
sir? You were
It
just a
is
puppet.
rubbish. Talking to
Come
you
on.
is like talking to a girl.
This is the kind of thing our government does. I mean,
Let Mr.
Oliver
Farouk of
Stone,
al-Qaeda speak.
I have a suggestion for you. Why don't you go to the Washington Monument? Take the family. Let's say October 12th, 2009, around 3:04. Take a guided tour to the top and just wait there. I think you will see that Al-Qaeda is very good at organizing things. You'll see.
Gentlemen, thank you. Coming up when we come back, the 2008 baby pandas are in. We'll have lots of footage of that.
God, man. I love the Onion. Good classic Onion.